Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Car and Bike podcast. Today we'll talk about adventure bikes. In fact, two adventure bikes in particular, which have more or less similar design, similar look, similar purpose. And Kingshuk recently finally reviewed the Yezdi Adventure, which is pitted squarely against the Royal Enfield Himalayan. So Kingshuk, what was your initial feel about the Yezdi Adventure? You haven't ridden it before, right?
No, this is the first time that I rode the Yezdi Adventure, and the first thought that came to my mind was that imitation is the best form of flattery. I mean, if you keep both bikes, the Yezdi Adventure and the Himalayan together, and you look at them from a distance, I mean, the Adventure looks a spitting image of the Himalayan. But of course, you come in closer and you see there are subtle differences. And yes, it has, in terms of design, I'm sure Yezdi could have been slightly more original in terms of design, in terms of aesthetics. I mean, it looks way too similar to the Himalayan for my liking.
Okay, so let's get down to how the Yezdi Adventure performance in terms of engine. So
Right.
it's got a slightly different character than the Himalayan's
Yes,
engine,
for sure,
right? So
for sure.
What is the difference? How does it feel like straight off the bat when you start it up, fire it up, and go for a ride?
So the Yezdi Adventure has the engine which we have already seen on the Java Perak. It's a 334cc unit, single cylinder, liquid cooled, and the characteristic of the engine is definitely different from that of the Longstone 411cc engine on the Himalayan. So the moment you thumb the starter, it wakes up with a nice gruff exhaust note, and the moment you start riding the motorcycle in the first and the second gear, the gearing is shorter than the Himalayan, and of course the moment you start riding, you feel that the Yezdi Adventure builds up space much quicker than the Himalayan. At least it feels like that way. We haven't ridden both motorcycles back to back, but it feels much more peppier, much more engaging to ride than the Royal Enfield Himalayan. And the bottom end lacks that punch that the Himalayan has,
Right.
like lots of bottom end torque. The Himalayan is really good for that, but the Adventure, it misses that punch. I mean, it's slightly, it feels sort of weak when it comes to the bottom end. The mid range is really strong. I think 0 to 100 probably the Yezdi Adventure will do it quicker and significantly so. But on tarmac, yes, I mean, between the two bikes, I think I will prefer the Yezdi Adventure.
The Yezdi Adventure's engine is also the high revving engine than the
Yes,
Himalayans, right?
yes,
It's got
absolutely.
it's got a higher rev. The red line.
Right.
It makes peak power is also
Higher than the Himalayan, that's correct, yes.
So in terms of specs, it makes 29.8 bhp and at 8,000 rpm, whereas the Himalayan makes about 24.3 odd bhp
Right.
and at a relatively lower 6,500 rpm.
Right.
So yes, the Yezdi Adventure feels freer revving than the Himalayan, that's for sure. We've ridden it. I've ridden it in the first ride, the entire Yezdi range. Of course, we were looking to do a proper real world comparison, but unfortunately the Himalayans are not available right
Yes,
now.
because most of the bikes on the media
The
fleet
media
have gone for the Himalayan Odyssey and other Royal Enfield rides that have been happening.
We can talk about the bikes in any case because he's just ridden it fresh and I have been riding the Himalayan off and on for many months now.
Right.
And well, so the Yezdi Adventure, seat of the pants feeling, it feels like a peppier engine. It feels more free revving than the Himalayan. So if you want that kind of a characteristic rather than the lazy long stroke thump of the Himalayan, then the Yezdi Adventure perhaps could make you feel slightly more perky, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, on tarmac, if you're riding both motorcycles on tarmac, what I feel is that as a long distance motorcycle, as a long distance tourer, the Yezdi will feel slightly better. It will feel much more engaging to ride, and you can sit at higher speeds.
Correct.
You can actually, on the Yezdi Adventure, you can actually sit on triple digit speeds, whereas with the Himalayan, you'll start feeling the vibrations creeping in. So that's one thing. But the one small drawback that the Yezdi Adventure has is the fact that the rear suspension is a tad too soft, and it has this tendency to bounce over big potholes, big bumps, and if you're riding the motorcycle on rocky terrain, so it has that kind of bounce, and it takes time to settle. So that's one grouse that I
So
have.
that's something you have to sacrifice. So you're saying that, on highway speeds, if you're covering long distances,
Yes.
it's the Yezdi Adventure which
For
will,
sure, for
in
sure.
terms of engine performance.
Yes,
But in terms of
absolutely.
ride quality, the Yezdi, the rear suspension is not that great compared to the Himalayan. Is
Yes,
that what you're
that's
saying?
true. I mean, the Himalayan feels much more settled, much more balanced.
Yeah. So let's talk about, since you're on the subject of the engine performance, let's talk about roll-on acceleration. How does the Yezdi Adventure feel like if you're sitting at 80 and you want to do an overtake 80 to 120?
No, for sure, for sure. I mean, the top end of the Yezdi Adventure is definitely better than that of the Himalayan because of the free revving nature of the engine and the fact that the engine has a higher, rev range. So that's one thing. I mean, even if you're sitting on the 5th gear, it has a 6th gear, by the way, the Yezdi Adventure, while the Himalayan has only 5 speed gearbox, and the Adventure has a 6-speed gearbox. So if you're sitting at say 80 kilometers per hour on the 6th gear, just cruising, in overdrive, and if you want to make that overtake, yes, you will have to shift down to 5th for sure. But even then, you have like more than enough juice to make a quick overtaking maneuver, while on the Himalayan you'll have to plan that.
Planned it, okay.
So
So
that's one
for
thing.
riders, those who like to cover long distances on tarmac primarily,
Right.
500, 600 kilometers in a day from Delhi to the Himalayan foothills or
Right.
maybe to Manali or someplace and beyond. Is it the Yezdi Adventure in terms of engine performance? Is it the Yezdi performance which will be Yezdi Adventure which will be a pick in terms
Yes,
of highway?
for sure. I mean, yes, the rear suspension, like I said, is slightly soft, but that's okay. I mean, if you maybe put in some luggage or something like that, the tendency to bounce will be reduced to a certain extent, but it won't go away completely, and that's a small sacrifice to make for better performance, for that matter. And the motorcycle handles really well. I mean, you show it a set of corners, a set of twisties, it's going to lean really well into this thing. The weight of the motorcycle, thankfully it disappears on the move, and it doesn't mind being cornered hard. It's ready to get hustled, so that's a nice thing. But I think the game sort of changes when you go off-road with the motorcycle.
Okay, let's talk about the on-road bit. When you say it, life loves to be cornered, so compared to the Himalayan, the Yezdi is more agile, you think?
Yes, I think I see.
Yezdi is more agile.
Yes.
So it loves being cornered more than the Himalayan.
Yes, I mean, it's much more flickable, it's much more easier. The confidence that you get is slightly more. I mean, there's not like a world of a difference between the two bikes, because when Yezdi made the Adventure, I mean, they benchmarked Himalayan to the T. I mean, the suspension travel is the same, the size of the wheels is the same, the weight is almost similar, just 1 kg difference.
Okay, so similar weight, similar wheel size.
Yes.
So, dynamically there's not much difference,
There's
except
not
the
much
chassis
difference.
probably makes
Yes,
a difference in the
yes.
Yezdi, right?
That's true.
So Yezdi, you feel, is a better handler on tarmac than the
Yes,
Himalayan.
yes.
But the whole point of adventure bikes is, of course, versatility. You cover
Right.
long distances. When you get to the rough stuff, when there are no roads disappear. You also want to do a little bit of off-road riding.
Right.
Not many of those adventure riders really do hardcore off-road riding, but even decent off-road riding. So how do these two bikes? How was your experience with the Yezdi? Because it's fresh. You've just ridden it. Like
Absolutely.
last
I mean, so let's go back just a little bit. We were discussing that the EST has a slightly weaker bottom end, and the engine is peakier. So when you're going off-road riding on the ESD Adventure, you have to be in the correct gear. That is very important. Otherwise, the bike is going to stall. Like if you're trying to cruise through loose sand in the first gear maybe, and if you just like let go of the throttle even by a slight bit, the bike will stall, and then that 198 kilograms of the motorcycle is going to be difficult to manage. But if you are in the right gear, if you keep the revs a little higher, then there's not going to be a problem, because the Yezdi Adventure with its suspension, especially on the rough stuff, I mean, it works well. And if you're riding on loose sand, you just give it a little bit of gas and you are going to go through. There's not going to be any problem. The motorcycle, like the Himalayan, can take a beating, that's for sure. I mean,
yes, I'll talk about the rocky trail, because I rode the Yezdi Adventure at Ambi Valley on a technical rocky trail, and you're right, you have to be in the right gear when you're doing off-road riding in the Yezdi Adventure, but you have to keep in mind that the engine needs to be in the right gear, and also it needs to be on the boil, so you need to be in the power band. So unlike the Himalayan, where you can just, the torque comes low down, so you open the throttle and it pulls. The Yezdi, you'll have to downshift and be in the peak of the power band. So you have to be careful about that. So on the Himalayan, if you can pull, say on a rocky or an off-road trail at second or third gear, the Yezdi will have to go a gear lower probably.
Absolutely, that's
to keep the revs up, because the power comes in slightly higher and so does the torque, right?
Absolutely. And which is why, you be in the right gear, you keep the motorcycle on the boil, and you stand up right across the rough stuff, it's not going to be an issue for sure. Like I said earlier, they have Yezdi has benchmarked the Himalayan to such an extent that the capabilities of both motorcycles, they sort of mirror each other. Of course, the engine dynamics is very different, but in terms of capability, they sort of mirror each other, and it's not like there's significant difference between the two bikes.
And in fact, I know of a couple of people who've been riding Royal Enfields all their lives, and when it came to buying an adventure bike instead of the Himalayan, they have actually chosen the Yezdi Adventure, just maybe for the different brand, or maybe for the peaky engine, or maybe better high-speed cruising, like you said.
Right.
Yes, it can do a fair bit of off-road riding, yes, but it's not like the locomotive feel of the Himalayan, where you're in one gear, open it and it goes. You'll have to work the gear shift on the Yezdi Adventure, whereas the Himalayan, you stay in one gear and it just pulls. So that's more easier on the Himalayan,
No,
right?
for sure. And if you talk about both motorcycles being ridden in the city, then I think the Himalayan is an easier motorcycle to ride in the city, because you can stay in one gear and the engine is much more tractable.
Tractable, correct. That's the word.
While on the Yezdi Adventure, you will have to work through the gearbox. I think it's slightly more flickable than the Himalayan if you're filtering through traffic, and if not, then the Yezdi Adventure, it handles better. It feels much more eager to shift directions, change directions. But the Himalayan for sure is a easier motorcycle to ride in the city. Yeah.
On the topic of the price is also more or less in the same ballpark, right? Of both the Yezdi Adventure and the Himalayan.
It's just uncanny how similar both motorcycles are, because the variant that we rode of the Yezdi Adventure, it has an ex-showroom price of 2,19,000 rupees, 2,20,000 rupees, and the price range of the Yezdi Adventure, it ranges between 2,15,000 to 2,20,000, and that is roughly the price range of the Himalayan as well. So as far as pricing is concerned, both bikes sit squarely in the same segment, in the same spot. And if you want to pick one over the other, if you're more of a highway cruiser than off-road rider, then I think the Yezdi Adventure makes more sense. But if you want to ride off-road more, then I think the Himalayan is a better bet.
We're talking about these two bikes because the Yezdi Adventure has been around for more than a year now, but we've only been able to do the first ride on the launch day, which was a very brief saddle time that we've had. We finally got the bike now, and Kingshuk rode it extensively now. That's why we're talking about comparing the two bikes, the Yezdi and the Himalayan. But how relevant are these two bikes in this day and age? We're sitting in late August now, is it mid-August now? So is it any relevant to pick these two, or should you be waiting for something else or looking at something else in the adventure bike segment? So Kingshuk, what are your thoughts?
So I think that right now, in the point of time that we are sitting in, sure, these motorcycles make sense, because the entry level, the budget adventure motorcycle segment is finally starting to bloom, and there are a lot of takers. All these off-road adventure zones that we have in and around Delhi, every weekend there is there's a throng of motorcycle riders who ride the X-Pulse, the Himalayan, and now the Yezdi Adventure as well. So yes, the community of budget adventure motorcycle riders is definitely growing, and these two motorcycles perfectly placed in that segment. But I think Royal Enfield has an ace up their sleeve with the impending launch of the Himalayan 450.
Yes, that's something which is coming. We have a lot of expectations from that bike, but it was supposed to have been launched by now. That has been delayed now. We don't have a confirmed date as yet when it's going to be launched. For now, you don't have the Himalayan 450. You do have the Himalayan 411. That's the point of this whole discussion.
Right.
Between the Yezdi Adventure and the Himalayan 411, which one offers you what kind of flavor? But once the Himalayan 450 does come into the picture, which we expect is going to be in a month or two,
Right.
but those timelines had been changed over and over again, so we're
Yes.
not sure as yet when it's going to come. We have a lot of expectations from that bike, more performance, better off-road ability. So once that comes into the market, maybe the Yezdi Adventure will not be as relevant as it is right now. But if you are looking for an adventure bike right now, in that particular segment, it's the Yezdi Adventure and the Himalayan.
Right.
So for more highway cruising, better highway cruising ability, it's the Yezdi Adventure according to Kingshuk. And if you want more tractability, better sales and service network, it's the Royal Enfield. That's the no-brainer.
I mean, that's one big difference that you will have to consider, because right now Yezdi and Java, the classic Legends group, has a very limited reach when it comes
Correct.
to sales and service network, but the Royal Enfield network is really widespread. I mean, you go to any town, any corner of India, you will find a mechanic that that can repair a Royal Enfield motorcycle, be it the Himalayan, be it any other bike. And apart from that, I think one more point that we should mention here is that the resale value of these motorcycles, because this is a segment that I've seen that people buy these motorcycles, the Yezdi Adventure and the Royal Enfield Himalayan in particular, and then say after a few years time they get used to that sort of performance and they want something better. So the ownership span of these budget adventure motorcycles is slightly on the lesser side, and if you do want to sell off your Himalayan or your Yezdi Adventure, then I think the Himalayan will have better resale value.
Better resale value, yes. If you want to know about any more bikes that you want us to discuss about, do leave a comment and we'll come back to you. Let us know your picks on which bikes we should talk about. Of course, in the budget adventure space, there's also the X-Pulse, but in terms of long distance cruising, both the Himalayan and the Yezdi Adventure have a slightly better ability than the X-Pulse. But do leave a comment, and if you haven't subscribed to the Car and Bike YouTube channel, do that as well and hit that bell icon so that you can get to listen to more such discussions, watch the latest reviews from the world of cars and bike. Thank you for watching, and always ride safe. Please wear a helmet and don't forget to strap it on tight.